History is full of desert moments and desert experiences. Even from Hagar outrunning Sarah and Abraham in the desert, to Jesus spending time with the Father for 40 days when the Spirit sent him into the wilderness, to the Israelites wandering in the desert for 40 years, a number rife with biblical symbolism. There have been a lot of trips out to the desert. There have been the desert fathers, there have been the desert mothers, there have been people that have sought refuge, there have been people that have tried to outrun things in the desert. And so, if you find yourself out in the desert, the first thing to ask yourself is how you got there and why you're there. Because there are a lot of reasons to be in a desert. You might be running and hiding. You might have made a wrong turn somewhere. Or you might have been drawn out into the wilderness so that you could be spoken tenderly to by God. There are a lot of reasons to be out in a desert. I am very partial to deserts myself. I love a good desert. You know, it's quiet out here. Nobody will bother you when you're in the desert. In fact, you don't have to talk to anybody when you're out in the desert. It's quiet. You can just be with God and talk to God. I love the desert. It's my place. Everything feels a little crisper, a little clearer when you're in a good desert. I remember before I started grad school, I went to the desert in New Mexico. That was a wow experience to spend 2 weeks out in the desert with Jesus. And it just, like, I was out there a few days and then I just started weeping. And then I just remember, like, I started hearing and experiencing Jesus so clearly. And that was just an amazing, amazing experience with God. And you know, just seeing and sensing the presence of Jesus with me was beautiful, and it set me up. It became a line in the sand moment where the love of Jesus was etched in my heart in a way I had never experienced before. And so I'm a big proponent of a trip to the desert. I think you should make a trip. I mean, I think everybody should make a trip to the desert, but I'm often left wondering, did God tell you to go out to the desert, or did you self-impose a wilderness upon yourself? That's a great question to ask. You know, you can be like John the Baptist. There's locusts out here, they're crunchy. You can probably find a cactus in some deserts, not this one, but there's water. There's water deep, deep down in the desert. And if you're out in a desert, you can drill down and find the water and bring it back, and you can bring it back for others. And that is a good reason to be in a desert. When you're in a desert, you can get down, get the water, find it, and have a well. You can be like the ancient Israelites, and you can dig wells in a desert. And a city can be built around a well that was dug in a desert. Another good reason to be in a desert is to commune with God and to hear clearly. There is something about a dry, barren place that quiets everything down to where it is just you and God. And so, if God asked you to be in a desert, here are some things that you should know. You should know that being in the desert is no punishment, but it is a great gift to be in a desert where you come to commune for a time just to commune and to be with God. The desert is only for a time, a place, and a season. The desert is not forever. The desert is for you to dig your well, to find your roots, and to learn how to be still and quiet so when it gets noisy, you can continue to commune. The desert is also for you to make history with God, where you can go back to a moment in time and say, I knew him then, I knew him when. And when you're not in the desert anymore, guess what? It gets a little busy and a little crazy, and you don't have time to sit out on a rock. You don't have time to sit out on a rock in the middle of nowhere. But the other thing that is really important to know about a desert, other than it is not punishment, it is not forever, is that you will take things from that desert that you can get nowhere else. So, if you are in a desert because God asked you to be there, remain. Do not come out of the wilderness until the voice of the beloved calls you to come out of the wilderness. And until they say, who is this coming out of the wilderness, leaning on her beloved? There's a huge difference between going out into the desert and dying of thirst and going out into the desert and finding spiritual water and literal water. You should never go out into the desert without knowing where your water is coming from. But there's also a difference between thriving in the desert and dying in the desert. I've seen a lot of people go out into the desert to die. And I've seen people go out into the desert and come back thriving. And I want you to thrive in the desert. So you already know why you're out here in the desert. It's to commune with God. It's to commune with yourself. It's to remind yourself that you are a being made of dust in a world made of dust. And that world was made by God. But there's a difference between dying and thriving in the desert. And in order to thrive in the desert, you have to start with knowing why you're there. If you're in the desert, you are here to be with God and to be with yourself. And in order to actually thrive in the desert, you have to come out here to commune with the one who made you. A lot of people run off into the desert trying to find themselves. And you will probably never find yourself in the desert. The desert, as you can see, is a bit of an echo chamber. But when you get really still inside of an echo chamber, you can begin to commune with God in a way that is so beautiful because there is stillness. So, if you want to thrive in the desert, you have to be there to commune with God. Communing with God as your Father looks like knowing that no matter how dry or dusty your circumstances may be, God is your Father. He is the Father of lights in whom there is no shadow of turning. And what better place to be than in a dry, sunny place to remember that the Father of lights has no shadow of turning. No shadow of turning means that there are no shadows in God. And everywhere you look in God, there is only light. There is only light in God. And when you come to a desert to commune with God, you are stilling yourself in order that you may know the truth and the way and the life, that you can commune with the life light inside of you because of what Jesus did for you and because of what God as a Father wants to pour through you. And the desert is a place that the Spirit will often send people to to find out who they are in God and who God is to them and who they are to God and who they are to the world. Some of the most powerful identity moments that I have had with the Lord have come out standing in the middle of places just like this. I can see scenes in my mind, and I can remember where I was when that voice that I know and that I love spoke words that resonated into the core of my being. His sheep know his voice, and when you come out to a place where you have no cell service, you have no people, you have no amount of distraction, and you shut it all off, you can hear from the one who made you and from the one who knows who you are, the one who knit you together in your mother's womb, and the one who made a plan for your life. So you're in the desert. You're in the desert to meet with God, to thrive with God, and to commune with God. So if you're thriving in the desert, you're receiving from God. That's where water comes in. Jesus met a woman at a well and said that he was living water. He went to the Samaritan woman at the well and he said to her, I am living water. So if you're in a dry, dusty place, he is the living water, and he is the one that you have to drink from and to receive from. And in this place of stillness, where you are connected to God as your Father, and you are receiving from Jesus through the power of the Spirit that led you into this place, you can remember that you were brought here because you were chosen and loved and wanted and seen. There's no other reason to be in a desert. And that's the only way to thrive in a desert, is to commune with God. Some people, like in Ezekiel, come out to the desert and they become a valley of dry bones, saying, I'm waiting for God to connect with me. I'm waiting for God to connect with me. And they get out into the dry place and they receive nothing. The best advice I can give you, if you find yourself in a desert, led there by the Spirit of God, is to come out here and get as still and as quiet as you can. Don't fight it. Don't push against it. Get as still and as quiet as you can, because you were led here not because you were being punished, but because you are loved. And the Lord longs to pull you in to a dry, dusty place, not so that you can be isolated, but so that you can know how loved you are. That is another big key for thriving in the desert. Knowing that you were brought here because you were loved. When the Spirit sent Jesus into the wilderness, he sent him there to, why? He had just had this major encounter with God, publicly identifying him as his son. And he came to the desert not for the approval of man, but to commune with God and to remember who he was. That he was the Word, that he was the Son of God, that he was God. Those are powerful identity statements over Jesus and over his life, that if he had not had those words deep inside of him, like the cherished, treasured gifts that they are, when God speaks an identity word into the core of your being, who knows? So, know why you're here. Come to receive. Get as quiet as you can, as fast as you can, and receive his love. And that's how you find living water in the desert. These plants in this desert, like these Joshua tree cacti around me, know how to find water in a dry place. And if you are rooted and grounded in the desert, you too will find water in a dry and dusty place.